Good morning, good afternoon, good evening around the world. My name is Doug Brunke. I'm the founder and CEO of Global Chamber. We have this conversation because this particular topic is of high interest to me. And I think one of the things that's driven it has been not just interacting with members internationally in on getting them connected and getting them connected in ways that is receptive to the receiving party. We end up spending our days connecting members to targeted clients and resources, and we want that process to go smoothly. And there are some times where cultural differences and changes get in the way. That we all are familiar with hopefully our own culture, right? And the fact that you're part of Global Chamber says that you're likely comfortable in multiple cultures. I don't think anybody I've ever met is completely fluent in every culture. I think there are people that are naturally gifted in navigating them. And that's perhaps part of why this event is on, is to help us with tips and techniques to be able to be better at that. And then also hopefully, go through some examples of things that we can help each other on to be able to be better at building business, to creating rapport with people earlier and faster and better. Because at the end of the day, when we're able to do that, we can get right to the heart of what business is all about, and that is doing the business. So there were a couple of different examples that I'd like to introduce at the beginning and then just go around the room. And the fact that Basile is here, one of them in particular, maybe both of them are about networking. And so I'd love to hear your take of it and all of your take of being part of a global culture, utilizing global culture, interacting with others in ways that is comfortable for them. So the first thing I wanted to introduce to you was just a very simple example. Um, uh, I'm headed to Vancouver on the weekend. We're Global Chamber event on Sunday where we're making a big announcement on commercial real estate and a platform that we're interacting with. And I'm happened to meet our partner in UAE, and I guess I better check to see if he's here. Eamon, probably not. I don't think he typically comes to these. And by the way, for all of the members, if you could put an asterisk in front of your name to identify you as a member. As soon as I'm listening, I'm happy to help facilitate that. But if you could, that would be great. That identifies you as a special global tribe person. It also identifies or bumps you up to the top of the room in terms of how Zoom sorts through, and just want to make sure that we're focused in on members. That relates to trust, which also relates to really kind of the overall topic here. If we're going to do business with each other, we need to trust each other. And if we can manage through the cross-cultural issues, we can do business faster, meaning we'll be able to have trust faster. And if there are cultural issues in the way, it's harder to develop that trust. And so really maybe a lot of what we're talking about here is trust. And so please put that in your name if you could. And if you don't, we'll identify you. That's fine. And secondly, let's find ways to develop trust and find ways to be more effective in our cross-cultural dealings. And so two things. The first one was this event that I'm part of, and I suggested to Eamon that we have breakfast prior to the event, and he he said, yeah, I'm staying at such and such a hotel. I said, fantastic. I'm happy to meet you there. Let's meet at, 8 o'clock. His response was, fantastic. You're my guest. I want to take you to breakfast. And he went on just to say some very positive things. And so here I am, in my position in the world and his position in the world. There are representative in the UAE. We're meeting in a foreign country. If it was in the US, like if it was here in Santa Monica, in Los Angeles, I would say, well, no, I'll be hosting you. But this is a foreign country. He's already offered to do this, and so this is one example of many that we deal with on a day-to-day basis where there's a different culture, we're in a different country. You know, I think the response and what I've responded is, great. I can't wait to have breakfast. I haven't gotten into the details of who's paying or anything like that. But in terms of how that all works, that all becomes part of the theme, right? Of, do we trust each other? What's the right cultural thing to do? What's our level with each other? How does each culture view hosting someone? And when you're in someone's foreign country, usually they're the ones that host. So how does a cross-cultural person, a global cultural person, address an issue like this? And how do you navigate it without just like, gee, who should pay? I guess we could ask that of how that does it. But, there's also personal style and things like that. So for my first question to you, and be thinking about that, is how do you handle things like that where you're dealing across culture and you're dealing with something even as simple as who's paying and who decides the place to go, and how to manage that? So that's my first question for you in a framework of global culture. How do you manage that? And number two is maybe a bigger question, and one that really prompted me to start this series, and that is, um, uh, Global Chamber is built off the philosophy that you can build trust virtually through a Zoom call. And you can build trust if there was a network like Global Chamber where people like Basile could join. And through that joining process, we review him. We see his LinkedIn profile. We see that he's a professional. We interact with him and we recognize him as someone who's knowledgeable and capable and gives value. He joins Global Chamber. We introduce him to people. They have a positive experience with him. It all works well. And then that gives us confidence in the future when we know what he does in terms of supporting the networking process across cultures. And when someone needs that, we can make an introduction and have confidence that it's likely going to be a fit and that those two people can work together. And so then, from Basile's perspective and someone who's receiving that introduction, they trust us to have some confidence that this could be a good match. They've already gone through the vetting process. That Global Chamber is, pretty good place. They're probably both members of Global Chamber. And so they then start a conversation that's at a higher level than just meeting in an elevator somewhere. There's a level of trust that's been developed to that point. It doesn't mean like, hey, let's spend 5 minutes and let's do a deal. That's not the case. But there's a higher level of progress that's been made because of that whole process. What we're working on, and we work on constantly, is to find ways to understand each member and who they want to meet, understand every member to see who they'd be willing to meet, and make those connections in warm ways to get as far as possible to give those two people the information they need to decide, do I want to move forward? How do I want to move forward? And if I move forward and have a conversation, I'm going to take it as far as I can, but I'm going to start at a high level. This had been prompted by several people over the years that had said things like, I've been going to Asia. One of them said, I've been to Asia. This is my fifth trip, and I'm hoping to get business soon. And my head was like, what? 5 trips to Asia? And it was a conversation, I think, about a $500 membership in Global Chamber. And I'm thinking, oh my God, how many thousands of dollars, how much time has this person spent? It breaks my heart to think that this person, in a kind of a cold, not kind of, in a very cold way, was traveling to all these places and still not successful. It boggles my mind. And they're debating whether they're going to spend $500 on a Global Chamber membership, So it make because the way I am, I'm thinking, I haven't done a very good job of explaining this to people. This is like, oh my God, I got to get better at this. That just a little bit of information, a little bit of investment in Global Chamber, this is something we definitely can help you with. So how am I not connecting with this? But I think part of it is that people some people have a hard time understanding that concept. So how do we warm that process? And the particular thing I'd like you to think about is where you live. And this is where it came out for me. Living in Phoenix, I had my Phoenix people. Everything was great. I've lived in dozens of different places, and I feel connected to probably 30 or 40 different places in the world where I feel very comfortable. But now I live in LA. And so when I talk to people in Phoenix, there's now a distance that wasn't there before when I lived in Phoenix. It's not the same. They view me as someone who's not there. Not that it's like there's a different feeling. And now I'm in LA and I'm wondering, do I want to be connected to LA, and why? I love it here. I think it's great. So all of us have a home, and we're all doing business somewhere else. So how do you manage that as you're doing your cross-cultural work in a way that is positive, even in those cases where you may not have very much business in your own place? That's certainly a scenario. There are many members of Global Chamber that are mainly connected to other places and other locations and want to have business in other locations. And so how, as a cross-cultural person, do you manage precisely where you live? And how do you create connections in warmer ways and warm ways to people that are in different locations without making that an issue, and in fact making somehow a positive out of it? I know, as a New Yorker who's lived in Detroit and San Francisco and Los Angeles and Tokyo and Singapore, and feeling comfortable in Geneva, where I work with DuPont, there are places, and I can connect when I'm in talking to someone in Geneva with some of my experiences there, and I use that I think in a very positive way. So I'd like to hear your thoughts in terms of how do you play off where you live, where you've lived, what your core cultures are in terms of how you frame up your connectivity in a global way. And so a lot to think about. But Basile, I'd like to start with you because you are a networking expert. You're a connecting expert. As you think about those two issues that I've laid out on the table, what resonates with you, and what would you like to contribute to the conversation?
Very good. Thank you very much, Doug. When you mentioned this committee to me, I was very interested. Several reasons. I had the opportunity to live in different countries and continents, Africa, Europe, and So I've seen it from different angles. I have a foundation that I created. It's called BL Competence Foundation. What we did is we researched the different field of business, art, education, and sport. And we've done that, working on that for 20 years. So we researched the best know-how so we can promote those. The reason behind that was the fact that if you can handle those 4 points, art, administration, education, and sport, you can literally change the entire planet. Okay? Now, over the last 20 years, we have been mainly working with business people. Why is that? Because the business people will open the entire world to us. That's what I'm very excited about the chambers, working on this project. Business people as the one who fund the arts. Business people have kids so they can impact education, and you'll find them involved in sports. So the chamber, what I'm trying to say, the chamber have with this council, this committee, an opportunity to have a major impact on the entire world. Okay. Now, there are basic principles that we could work out in this committee and come up with those. And they will be the fundamentals of the worldwide culture. I'll give you an example. We have a seminar last time done by somebody who was showing us company doing business in India or doing business in China, and they was explaining, Doug, you remember that seminar? How they were failing, or some fail, some succeed. McDonald's succeed because they understood, for example, that don't give a hamburger to an Indian, give them a veggie burger. So the other company fell because they show an Asian person going like this, which is an offense for the Asian people. So it was a matter, and it is always a matter of finding out what is that those people consider acceptable or not acceptable. Like if I'm going, for example, to let's say Geneva, a thing I could do, like I would find out what is okay for them, what is not. If I go out to dinner with somebody who does pay, so I can educate myself, that will be understanding the rituals of that specific country. I would say it comes down to being able, one, having a good communication with people with respect and trust, and two, understanding the rituals. I'll give you an interesting story. Yesterday, I went to a conference here in DC, was put on by a Northeast, by Muslim. I'll go to the booth, and many a time I extended my hand to women, they went like this. You don't shake hands with them. But I didn't make a thing out of it. So I understood that that's not the way to go. So therefore, I was no longer extending my hand to them. Now, I would like to finish up with one point. Doug, you mentioned home. The way we look at it, or the way I look at it, I say home is where I stand. If I am in the US, then US is home. If I am in Europe, then Europe is home. If I am in US and talking to somebody in Europe, I just keep in mind what they are interested in or what they consider acceptable or not. And I don't beat myself if it goes wrong or somebody got upset, because in interacting with them, I show respect to those people. Even if it goes wrong or whatever, no big deal. It won't be an issue because I show first and foremost respect to the people I'm talking to. So that's my take on it. Thank you.
Very, very important. Thank you. That's an awesome way to view it, and I totally get it, and understand how that can be very effective. Lulu actually does this for a living as well. Is an expert on cross-cultural activities. And Lulu, what would you like to say, either about the things that I've queued up, either about what Basile has mentioned, or anything else you'd like to bring to the conversation about the concept of a global culture and how we can use that to be more effective.
Thank you very much, Doc. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, very
Good,
well. Thank you.
good. I think if I can start from the concept of home, you can look at from the home, obviously, first is the physical concept. And secondly, what we're talking about here is the cultural concept. Many of us in this meeting here, like you mentioned, have lived or are living in different cultures. So what you call a home is actually where you identify with the most. Because I was talking to somebody, it's also a chamber member. They called their home is in Switzerland, but then they spend most of the time in Germany. So similarly, uh, I actually check myself. People, when I go back to China, people say, "Oh, you're going back home." I said, "Actually, no, I'm not going back home. My home is England now. I'm going back to my hometown, to my home country, home city." So it is where you feel more comfortable or where you identify more with at the moment. So for people who are like living a nomadic international life, there always a place that they call it home. It doesn't necessarily mean they spend most of the time in that place, but that's where they identify with the most. It's their home. In terms of what Basil said, is very important. It's true. When you go out networking with people, is to have some awareness to do the homework even beforehand to see what kind of social event or network event you are going into. So who are the people who are coming? Do you have a broad understanding of the book you shared with us before? Really stick with me, Doug. It's called Then You Can Decide Whether You Shake Hands, Kiss, or Not, right? So it is this kind of broad assessment to do some homework. Then you know, and then when you go into the event, you just watch how other people behave, and yes, just keep an open mind. It's not going to be too difficult to pick it up, and take it lightheartedly, and be apologetic. Just to say, if you made a mistake, like Battle said, if you extended your hand to a lady, and then uh, they don't shake hands, and oh, sorry, I forgot. This is not handshaking culture. Just take yourself, take yourself lightly. Then it's going to be okay.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think the points you make, I think very much align with what Basile mentioned in terms of wherever you are, whoever you're dealing with, whoever you're working with, whoever you're speaking with, to extend yourself into their realm. I think that's very hard for the majority of people to do. I think that's very hard. And I think it's only a small percentage. And I usually think it's like maybe 1 in 5 people who have the ability to extend themselves to the other person to be empathetic enough to understand where they're coming from. It's something I think on that order. And the analogy I use is with marketing. I've spent time in marketing, and I know good marketing is not just coming up with like good ideas of how do you position something or technically how to build a website, but it's understanding the product and understanding the potential markets and matching that up. The product management role, for instance, or just marketing management, to be able to do that, the complexity of that, and all the way and see it. I've just over the years found that almost, it's probably very few people can really do that. And this is a similar type of activity where people can be really empathetic. It's one of the reasons why most people don't do global business, is that not only are you doing business with someone and trying to relate to what they might see of your business and of your product, but now you layer in the cross-cultural piece. And so so this is something that I think we sitting in this room are aware of, are probably everyone here is really good at it. And we're kind of working at looking at how do we now refine that. Overall, I think there is an opportunity, and Basile, you've mentioned this too, and Lulu, we could, I think the ultimate next steps with this group, with this committee, is to how to improve everybody's capability to a higher level in terms of these kinds of things. And then more broadly, beyond Global Chamber, how do we impact the world more in a bigger way so that more people are receptive to the world and not put off by the cultural differences? If you understand it, at least at some level, you'll be more receptive to it. If you don't understand it, you're going to shy away. And that's why less than 1 out of 100 companies exports still in the US. 99 out of 100 do not. And a lot of that is that they don't think about it. They don't want to think about it. They've had some experience that wasn't good for whatever reason. And, ultimately what our goal is and our purpose is not only to have you be more successful, but to have more people receptive to doing business with other cultures. And these, I think, are important questions.
Yeah, Doug, can I
Azil,
share something?
Did you have a response to Lulu and anything else you'd like to add?
No, Louis is totally on the point. We're pretty much saying the same thing. And I totally agree with him. One of the things I want to share, which we use in our training, is one of the questions that I've got over the years is people asking me, how do I start a conversation? How do I talk to anybody? So we figured that out, at least on a local level at the event. This is what we teach people. You walked up to somebody and you say, I don't think we have been introduced. It works 1,000% of the time. And I'm going to explain why it works. Whenever you have an event, be it business, social, or whatever, there is a person called the host. One of the primary functions of that person is to connect Doug to Lulu or Jim to Sophie and whatever. That is their heart. That is their main functions. But the hosts, you see, are not necessarily trained as to their function. They just bring people together. So when you walked up to somebody, anybody for that matter, and you say, I don't think we have been introduced, I've seen people put the foot down, clean their hand, and say, no, we didn't. And they start talking to me. Why? Because you're taking responsibility now and wearing the hat of the host, who knowingly and not unknowingly did not carry that function. So you're going beyond what you're supposed to do. You're wearing somebody's hat, and they're all open to you. And from there, the conversation just rolls. Any one of us can try that. Walk into any event. You can approach anybody. They could be a minister. They could be the garbage man and everybody in between. All of them respond positively, 100% of the time, to that approach. Because of the background information I gave you, you're taking responsibility for the connection. I just want to throw that out there.
I'd like to open it up to all of you. I know people like Julia on the call. She's got a very cross-cultural, cross-border business, and you, I'm sure, all do all sorts of things to be able to facilitate that, and sometimes get backed into corners in terms of like, now what do I do? Considering that, Cher, I'm less have a less of a view of what your cross-cultural activities are, but but please feel free to share. Jim, I know you work with different people and around the world, and a lot of what you do, I would imagine, is centered around their business. And so you need to get the cultural aspect for you largely many times is what is their business, and then how do we translate this into the world, and so there's a lot of similarity in terms of that process. We asked you to talk to one of our members who was having a hard time articulating their business case and how that works. And so I think there's a lot of similarity with that process than what we go through cross-culturally. And I know all of you, I'm sure, have similar experiences. And I'll just open up the floor to anyone who'd like to either just unmute or raise your hand or any other comments you'd like to make. Don't be shy. Oh, Julia, hi. Thank you for raising your hand.
Hi.
Please go ahead.
Thank you for this. I was hanging out off camera eating some early dinner. Yeah, thank you for this topic. Like Doug mentioned, I work internationally between Europe and the US. And then I also work with leadership teams that have people from different places. So like a couple of you mentioned this, really getting into the heads of the people and the culture, like the people that you're talking to is important, um, even when it's in the same, even when it's in the same situation. So, for example, in Switzerland, a lot of people are very polite, it's very diplomatic, and then so I'll have some people on the team that are Swiss, and then other people who are German, who are more direct. You know, they share a language, but it's a completely different culture. So I find myself almost like switching gears a little, like, okay, is their culture speaking or is their personality speaking? And there's no way to be perfect, I think, but just being really curious and humble about you know where they're coming from, I think goes a long way.
That makes a lot of sense. Are there particular cultures that you struggle with? The Swiss one is interesting, you know, in terms of you know in different ways. It sounds like you've become very familiar with it and you're very comfortable there. What are there still some that you struggle a bit with?
Well, I'm from the greater Boston area, and I struggle with the South. Um, like, you know, saying, "Oh wow, they're really excited about my product. They're gonna sign up," and it's like, "Oh no, they were just being really, really nice." The Swiss are polite, but they don't give you false hope. And so I think as like a New Englander, being really direct, sometimes I struggle with that.
Yeah. Yeah, New Yorkers are the same way. It's just like, just be real. Just let me know. And then the
Yeah, tell me
cultures,
you don't like it. It's okay.
that whole ghosting thing or being just friendly, and you know, those
Yeah.
are not too compatible with those of us from the Northeast, right? Where it's like, you know, just let us know what's the harm in doing it. Well, there's definitely cultural reasons. So, Bazil, have you run into that as well?
Yeah, in this here, one of the things the thing we do is we look at how they react and we talk at that level. Like if they are excited, you are excited. If they are quiet, I did a sale last week, actually 2 days ago, where I was on the screen with somebody, but they were like this, blah, 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 blah. Okay, well, I also started talking, blah, 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 blah. Guess what? They signed up. So like Julia was saying, is reading where they are and going along with their mood. because now you create acceptance. They agree with that because that's where they are at.
Interesting. So if they're that and you try to compensate by creating some excitement or doing something different, that's the wrong approach.
Yes, yes, yes. You're hitting the key point because all the sales book tell you got to be excited. You got to be excited. No, you got to read where they are and speak at that level. Are they excited? You are excited. Are they in apathy? You are in apathy. Are they angry? You say, "Oh, those people, I don't know why they are here." And you walked into the office and they say, "Yeah, we should put them against the wall and shoot them." They say, "Oh, soulmate, you understand me."
Interesting. That's always been my like in Korea, as an example, a lot of the activities that I did, because I was so steeped in Japan, it's much more my style in Japan, where it's just thoughtful and unemotional and just kind of let's logically go at it. It's very engineer kind of approach generally. But then when I'd go to Korea, there'd always be like exciting things going on, and not always, it always seemed like it was like something was wrong. It was like, oh my God, like what's going on? And I'm trying to stay calm and things are like bubbling over, and even when it just seemed like it should be just a normal thing. And so how I think I always responded by just remaining calm. And maybe
no, they are excited, you are excited.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah,
that's what worked.
if someone's going to be angry, it's hard for me to kind of escalate things for that, for sure. But
just try it and you'll see if you get the sale or not.
Okay. Got it. Okay, that's really great feedback. Bob, you I don't know whether you can talk or not, but Bob, is someone from another culture living in a new country, and yet you seem to have thrived really well. So congratulations on that. I admire that, and I'm sure there are times that are difficult, but on the surface of your involvement with Global Chamber, it looks like you're doing a great job, and I really appreciate the work that you're doing. I look forward to our conversation next week with one of our members in Toronto. So thank you for joining today, and look forward to your contributions going forward. Does anybody else have anything they'd like to share?
Bob, yeah, a couple of people have their hands up, just so you know.
Oh, I didn't see that. Okay, sorry about that. Julia, did you have any additional comments? I'm sorry I missed your.
I had no, I just raised it. I had a question, like Basil or anyone else who wants to answer. It's really important to adopt to the different cultures, and I loved your comment about mirroring different behaviors or communication styles. How do you think of that balance between adopting to a culture but also still being authentic, like not losing yourself? Or do you ever think of that?
Okay, yeah, I can take that on. It's on like an actor. You get what I'm saying? You're not changing yourself. Like an actor, you can tell him, show some anger, he goes in anger. Show in apathy, he goes in apathy. It doesn't mean that that's who they are. That's not what they are in life. They're just going there. They're remaining themselves. But they go, it's just like a tool really for you to use. It doesn't mean if you are an upbeat person, you're an upbeat person. You're facing somebody's apathy, you're trying to sell them their apathy, you go in apathy. But that does not change you. It's just like, think as an actor, you're just getting into a role. You're playing, you're having fun with it. Do you get what I'm saying? That's what I do.
Well, where do you draw the line, though?
Yeah.
Because and bro culture for me is an example of that. When I'm with a bunch of men, they start to be that man thing that just to me is not very appealing. And I find myself when I go along with that, I feel dirty. I don't feel like that's me, and I don't feel comfortable with that. So where do you draw the line? Because there's things that happen that are against the way we are.
I didn't get your question. That mean like, what do you mean by being man? Like, I didn't get it. What do you mean by being man? Like, can you give me a little bit more context so I can think with?
But so it's kind of this like bro culture of like men getting together and
Mhm.
the high fiving and let's do sports, and then there's a little bit of, and sometimes goes over the line in terms of
Mhm.
condensation toward women, and kind of the man woman thing, and creating some,
Mhm.
like that whole thing. It happens on the golf course. It happens, just kind of informally. It doesn't happen very often at Global Chamber, not
Mhm.
with members, but I have had women at Global Chamber who have come to me and said, I love Global Chamber because in other places I've been, that bro culture, I feel diminished. I feel
Mhm.
like I'm at a different level than other people. I think I see it mainly outside of Global Chamber, but it's there.
Mhm.
But there are people like that. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
I've been doing event for over 20 years, and my take is it has to do with the top of that organization, whatever the group is. Like the top of the organization has an influence on the culture.
Yeah.
If the preaching accept yourself and be yourself, it goes down. If I was like you, I was you. Let's say I go out and the men start doing that thing. I'll grab one and say, "Bro, calm down." I just make a point to one, and you will see it's going to relate to the rest of the people. If you do not agree with that, you are yourself. Be yourself. I always say that. Accept yourself. If somebody does something that you do know is not quite right, is not justified, I grab them by the hand and say, "Bro, chill."
Okay.
And they're going to penetrate, pervade the whole of the space, I believe. That's how I'll go about it.
Okay. There are also business actions, and I don't know how much of this goes on. It used to be in Detroit, the Windsor Ballet, where at business they'd go over to the strip clubs across in Canada or in Korea, where there's all sorts of things that happen. And one of the reasons why I was told when I was trying to get a woman at DuPont Korea that women don't belong in business. It had to be kind of men doing that. And so there are things that happen that we see that, I reject. And those are extreme. I mean, those
Mhm.
are not those are not things that happen in a networking event.
Mhm.
However, there are, value things that do come up from time to time. And I'm imagine how do you handle it given how you just described being an actor, but there's a line that you have, right?
Yes, there's a line. I would say in those cases, like strong things like that, my take is I'll put together a plan. If I want change, it's not just talking to, I put together a plan, maybe bring them, meet some of those people, talk to them, hash it over on whatever, but it wouldn't be a one and done. It's going to take a plan or whatever. And at one point, you'll have to make an executive decision. I'm doing it and be able to deal with the repercussion or whatever. But if what's right is what's right for you, knowing well that you took everything in consideration, you are not making that decision only to benefit you, but to benefit most people. And just as sometimes you'll have to push it through.
Okay. Julia, I didn't mean to take what you said in the wrong direction, but
No,
is
yeah, I
that
mean that's
part of what you
yeah,
were talking
I
about?
wasn't thinking about it in terms of like a values thing, but yeah, that's definitely in line with that thought. Um yeah, I think I don't know. I think maybe if going back to like the actor component, it's like finding that bit of your personality that aligns with whatever that culture is. And so for example, like if it's a more like conservative, not like socially conservative, but just like conservative body language and speaking and everything. But if you're very like loud and like this, is there a part of you that has that like Zen chill heart that you can tap into without being like a completely different person? So that's just kind of how I'm wondering.
I just want to add, maybe the
Um,
actor was not the right way. Play will be more like it. We live life. We experience all the emotion, fear, anger,
Yeah.
antagonism, emotional, what have you. In this case, we're just playing to get into it. Because
Yeah,
like Doug
yeah,
was saying, if somebody is all excited, for example, and you like this, they feel like you're not that
yeah,
person. And
right,
it doesn't
right.
help move the needle. But it's just playing. And once that is over, you move on and you are you. I mean, just to clarify what I'm trying to
Yeah,
communicate.
that makes sense. Thank
Mhm.
Um,
But Lulu, did you have something to add, please?
yes, I think I just want to go back to what Julia mentioned. That very key word she used about called changing gear. So in intercultural and cross-cultural relationship and communication, changing gear is actually the key word. So it's like we go into a networking, a social event, you identify, like driving, yeah, you quickly see which side of the road people are driving on. Then you change gear, you change to the right side. So you might not get it 100% right, but at least you don't get run over. So I think that's very important. Changing gear is very key. But in terms of the identifying with people, um, I probably hold a different view. Maybe I'm just not my kind of personality. I think there is a challenge when we try to culturally identify with people. We need to be careful not to offend people. Let me give you an example. Is culturally, because when people hear that I'm from China or this and that, uh, people, it's very subtle. People try to say things like the kind of odd phrases they picked up from the street in Chinese, and then keep doing that. Eventually, it becoming quite offensive. So I think we need to be careful when we are trying to identify with people culturally, particularly when it comes to language. If you speak the language, do so, but at sufficient prophecy. Otherwise, I wouldn't suggest to try odd phrases because that can run the risk of offending people. Yeah.
Thank you. Really good. Good. Cesar, how are you?
Hey, Joe, can you hear me?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Okay, no, I just wanted to add a couple of things because I've been thinking. Um, that question about where you draw the line reminded me about an event we had many years ago with Seth Sales, and where he was telling us about the story of drinking out in Korea with some business partners. And I remember always that example that when he said, like, yes, I'm gonna go out to drink with you. He already established since the beginning that he already had some plans for the early morning. So that kind of helped with them to understand that he was not going to stay the whole night drinking because of commitments. So I remember that example. And recently I was in an event, well, as you know, last month, and I was having conversation with people from different parts of the world, and but this group of 4 or 5 people, they were all smokers. And so we were having a good conversation and they were like, yo, let's go out smoke. And I don't smoke, but I say, I'm having a really good conversation. So I joined them outside, but I didn't smoke. So I think that's kind of a way to realize. So I'm not going to smoke because they're smoking, but if I can continue the conversation with them, why, why should I stop it just because I don't smoke? So something I thought. And then something to add to the general conversation is, and I see this in a lot of the countries where there's a lot of gap, or a big gap in the high income, low income sectors. It's different sometimes. Like in Mexico, if you deal, I mean, you can have the general cultural background, backset, but then if you deal with someone in the high income level, you really need to set a different tone and different things versus comparing to someone in the low income sector. I've seen that in different countries where, within the country, you just need to bear in mind that the differences are huge comparing to maybe the US or Europe. Um, and that's the case of a lady that I met from Egypt. She's a business leader, entrepreneur. She's leading the way for women in business. And someone was asking her like a lot of questions that were very, like enclosed in that Arabic type of culture. And she was like, no, you're getting it wrong. Things are not like that. And I'm able to do business. I'm able to study and improve myself. So I think it's important to be open, and as Lulu said, be careful, because sometimes we just read something in the books, and that particular person. So we need to take it case by case, because that particular person might have a different background within his or her own society.
That's brilliant in terms of the hierarchical status within a country, and that's a different culture too, isn't it, Lulu? Same. So Lulu, we're wrapping up, or we need to wrap up. I'd like to come to you and Basile as maybe some final comments. How would you like to wrap up, and anything that you'd like to share in conclusion for today?
I say I'm very excited about this. I wanted to say we play our card right. I don't know if that's the right word, but we have here an opportunity to have a tremendous impact on the entire planet. That's when we started about what we're doing here in this community. It is huge. Sometimes in life, the most important things are not things you can see with the eye. The culture is not something you necessarily see with the eyes, but it have a tremendous impact on the planet. And business people, entrepreneurs, are the people who can have the most impact. So if we have that right here and we share it with other people and they take it out there, will bring about that understanding of people. They will be more tolerant with one another, and I think that'll make matter easy for all of us.
Thank you. Before Lulu has final comments, thank you, Jim Cook, for the very clear help that you've given for my breakfast on Sunday. So he should pay. It's his hotel. He invited me to his hotel. So I think that makes it very clear, and so I'm going to accept his offer. Lulu, any final comments from you, please?
Thank you very much. I think if I go back to where you started, is actually you said everybody knows about our own culture, but in reality, we know very little about our own culture until you actually start living in a different culture.
Yeah.
So when you start going out to associate and relate with people, it's very important to develop more study on your own culture to start with. So because that becomes a tool as well for networking. People tend to ask you, how do you do these things in your country? Sometimes you realize actually you can be surprised you don't know the answer. So it's very important to start with learning about our own culture. And then when you go out, be aware, don't be fooled by people who speak English, therefore we speak the same language, we don't. So really pay attention to the cultural identity behind those universal language. So yeah, take note that people are still from different cultural backgrounds, and then learn to switch gears, like Julia said, and learn to change lanes if necessary. And at the end of the day, to say, to ask genuine questions. So tell me, how do you do this? And how do you do that in your culture? And be the learner. And then, yeah, people will be willing to teach you so that you don't get into trouble, and then you're able to build genuine relationships. Thank you.
I'd like to focus in on that topic next time. How do you find out? We superficially, we look at someone and say, well, they must be this. Like for me, well, there's an American. Well, I lived in Asia, and when I come to the US, I act like an Asian, and they don't think of me as an American. And by the way, there's 14 American cultures, of which Julia kind of referred to it, like Southerners are like, oh my God, it's like I don't even kind of, when you really think about it, they act so different differently than others. And there are 14 of those in the US. And so how do we understand when we're dealing with someone what culture they are? Because even if they're from there, they've lived other places, or they're from they're an amalgam, and they're their own person, let alone different cultures. And so how can we be what Basile talked about, is be the actor to be in their space? How do we do that? By looking and listening and asking. Let's talk about that the next time. And if you have other comments or other things you'd like to talk about, please let's do that. It's the first Thursday of the month, so I'm not sure when that is in November, but we'll try that again. If you have any other needs between now and then, let us know. And Cesar, or if you're still in the room, any final comments or anything coming up that we should be aware of?
Thanks, Doug. There's a lot of things going on. I would say take a look at our calendar and join those events that you think are of interest. We have next week, in the next couple of weeks, we have the regular league events like League of Extraordinaries, League of Opportunities, and these are always good for you to update us and update other members about what you're doing, and so they're trigger connections, and that help us to really help you at the same time.
I'd like to introduce Myla Catalan, who's new to Global Chamber. She'll be working on marketing initiatives, and we had this conversation earlier today. This is her first day, and so we talked about who members are and how we treat members with reverence and with honor, and how we handle them professionally. And so this is her first opportunity. I'm not asking, I don't, you don't need to say anything, but I at least wanted to recognize that this group here within this meeting, you're the first group of members who get to meet Myla and see Myla on the call. So thank you for joining today, and hopefully we haven't scared you away. And hopefully this is the kind of conversation that you'll enjoy, from the next week, next month, next year, and beyond. Thanks, Myla, for joining, and thanks everybody for joining. Have a great day. We'll talk to you soon.
Okay, bye-bye.
Thanks, Basile. Really appreciate it.
Okay.
Thanks, Lulu. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.